Nicholas Bornos of Capitling, and I would like to welcome you to the last, but definitely not the least, of the panels of our Decarbonization Forum. We are closing this forum by providing the point of view of various stakeholders whose participation and contribution to shipping and decarbonization is vital. So we have with us shipowners, charterers, financiers, investors, and they are going to share with us their insight on the process and their viewpoint. I'd like to thank everybody for joining. I will let the moderator, Arnstein Eknes of DNV, to introduce everybody. Thank you very much for the moderation, and thank you very much to everybody for joining. And the floor is yours, Arnstein.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. It's great to have this panel, but before we start the panel discussion, there was one person that was also supposed to attend, which unfortunately cannot be here, and that is Mr. Jerry Kalogeratos from Capital Product Partner. He is launching a bond offering in Athens today, and that's the reason why you don't see him in the panel. My plan now initially is to let every panelist introduce themselves. So I will start with me. I'm from DNV. I have a background in particular for special vessels and offshore ships where introduction of new fuels have been quite early, and I would say testing fuels and testing technology and testing solutions prior to the rest of the shipping. And that is very much where my background is, to try to find out what is coming, how can we test it, how can we make sure that the technology that may come on shipping in larger quantities will actually work, that it will be safe, and of course later scalable. So that's short about me, and I will do my best here to moderate. I think we start with Mr. Paulo Almeida from Tufton Investments. If you say a few words about yourself and your company, please.
Oh, sure, thank you. Paulo Almeida, I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Tufton Investment Management. We are a leading investor in the shipping industry. We manage about $1.2 billion of institutional capital in a number of funds, one listed, 3 or so private. We own a total of 70 ships. And we, last year, as a part of UN Climate Week, we committed to be net zero in our portfolio by 2050, and also to investing in zero carbon capable ships before 2030.
Thank you. And Mr. John Lycouris.
Thank you, Arnstein. Hi, I'm John Lycouris from Dorian LPG. We are a US-based LPG vessel, large vessel operator, VLGCs as they're called. We transport propane and butane and other products from the natural gas liquids chain. We operate 20 vessels, and we do operate a pool called the Helios Pool. We have operations in Denmark, in Greece, in Singapore, and the head office is in Connecticut, United States.
So truly global operation. And then over to you, Mr. Richard Sadler.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a board advisor for Purus Marine, so not on the executive team. But Purus Marine is a company that's totally focused on decarbonization solutions in the marine economy. I mean, in the blue economy. I think in some ways, because they're a new company, they have the advantage of having no legacy assets. So they're always looking for solutions in mainly at the moment 4 sectors. The first being the metropolitan mass transport systems on waterways. Secondly, on offshore wind, both on crew transfer and service vessels. Thirdly, on regional logistics, container, trying to get lorries off the road and transporting low carbon solutions for that. And then finally with gas transportation as well. And they've also made a commitment that within the 2030s, they will be zero carbon as well. And so they're only investing in technology solutions with that aim in mind.
Thanks, Richard. And then finally, but not least, Mr. Andrea Olivi from Trafigura.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Olivi. I'm the global head of wet freight here at Trafigura. Trafigura is a big commodity trader. We're big users of vessels. We have fixed more than 4,100 vessels in dry and wet last year. We're obviously very committed to decarbonizing our freight operations. So I look forward to being part of this panel. Thank you very much for inviting.
Thank you, Andrea. And maybe I can start shooting a question to all of you. I think, Andrea, you feel free to start on this one, but the subject of decarbonization, when looking back, what is different today, the way you operate today and the way you make decisions today versus a few years back in time? I mean, is it only decarbonization, or are there other issues that are really pressing on your mind today when making decisions and making your operations?
Well, I would say that decarbonization is probably on top of our agenda. It's definitely changed our modus operandi. The way we are investing in hardware and software has changed. The things we look for, even in people when we hire talent, are changing. We are doing this because we want to be at the forefront of the, let's call it, maritime decarbonization revolution, which we think has started and we think will become more and more important in the years to come. And we want to be champions of this revolution. Just to give you a couple of examples, over the last 18 months, it's no secret, but we have been investing into a lot of modern vessels on long-term TCs. We almost on a weekly basis look at retrofitting energy-saving devices on some of our owned vessels, but we also collaborate with some of our long-term TC owners to retrofit energy-saving devices on our long-term TCs. So we are spending a lot of time internally, a lot of resources also internally towards the decarbonization, and so I do believe that it has definitely changed the way we do things. I would also add that it's bringing us closer to some of our ship owners, where we are collaborating a lot more with them, because the one thing about decarbonization is it's not one company that will be able to master it, but it's a collaboration across many industry players that will allow us to decarbonize the shipping world.
Yeah, I heard you mention this with the long-term time charter, and then I'm thinking that this is probably also an indication that this is not for the speculative market or for the spot market. This is really requiring a long-term vision. Yeah. Paulo, any comments or reflection from your side? Do you support what Andrea was saying here on the shift towards decarbonization in the thinking and priorities?
Yeah, I think Andrea has covered that really well. We're doing a lot of similar things, and I think it's natural because Trafigura is a very important charterer, and in many cases a long-term charterer. We're an owner of vessels that primarily have them out on long-term charters with good charterers across all spaces. We're also, when Andrea mentioned in terms of recruiting talent, decarbonization is actually a key aspect of what we're looking for in new people as well. We are similarly to what Andrea said. Actually, we're doing quite a lot in energy saving devices as well. We started doing that about 18 months ago, and I think by early next year or maybe middle of next year, given supply chain issues currently happening around the world, not just in shipping, we'll probably have about half of our ships fitted with those, and on average we'll have 10 to 15% fuel savings. So I think Andrea hit on a lot of points correctly, and he mentioned collaboration as well, and I think we'll talk about collaboration probably a bit later as well.
We will definitely do that. John, any comments on this? Is your focus the same as the previous panelists?
Sure. Yes, we it is obvious that we are all aligning. It's becoming more and more an alignment of the financiers, the investors, the manufacturers, the charterers, the equipment manufacturers, the regulators, to move towards decarbonization. And and really, I think it hasn't escaped anybody's attention that we need to have a strategy. We need to go forward in steps. We are not going to achieve it in one fell swoop by doing one ship or doing two ships. You cannot build efficient and carbon-free ships yet, not even designed yet. This is a frustration of mine that we cannot really have clean vessels yet, but it is what it is. This is the way the shipping industry has evolved. We should all work together. I think, like every other company, we have a strategy to go forward. We are taking a lot of current steps, including hydrodynamics, digitalization, logistics of our vessels, the machinery of our vessels. So we have a number of items, and hydrodynamics, as I first said, the premium paints, hull form optimization, energy saving devices, hull cleaning, propeller polishing, and so on, digitalization, real-time reporting of data, dashboards for on board and ashore logistics, routing, speed optimization, just-in-time arrival, and the machinery, fixing up the engines so they can be as efficient as possible in the current environment. So yes, we are full speed ahead on doing a lot of things, because not, as I just started saying, not one thing will make us go until 2030, when we will be able to do the more important steps of alternative fuels, carbon capture, or something else, hydrogen maybe. Yeah,
a lot of different actions, and maybe a different orchestra to manage. I'm thinking, Richard, you with your background also, I think this must resonate quite well, that there are multiple opportunities here. Are there particular opportunities you see when Purus is also investing in the renewables industry? You mentioned that you are embarking this new coming offshore wind.
Yeah, I mean, I think in all four sectors, there's different opportunities. I think, to summarize what everyone else has said, which we would 100% agree with, if we were sitting around the table, I don't know, even 5 years ago, we would have been looking at quality and safety, commercial pricing, and reliability as the three main factors. And now, undoubtedly, I wouldn't just say sustainability, but I'd say ESG in general has now sort of gone from being a triangle to be a square, and maybe more weight on the last rather than the others. But shipping has always been about betting on an uncertain future, and now I don't think we're just betting on an uncertain commercial future, but we're betting on as John said, a really uncertain technological and regulatory future as well. So incredibly different. But as you say, I mean, whether we look at mass transport systems using fuel cells, hydrogen, whether we look at offshore wind, and now with the chance to power up batteries on power buoys, etc. Where we've got great opportunities with fuel cells on regional transport, and probably with carbon capture as well. So I mean, I think the other thing is there is no one solution, as John said, but there are leading solutions for each of the sectors that we look at. And to say the advantage Purus has got is we don't have legacy ships with investment that we have to find retrofit solutions for as well. So definitely everyone has got different solutions and different opportunities.
I think what you say here is with a lot of solutions and probably not a silver bullet. It's reminding me on a story I heard from a good friend in Equinor. He was trying to explain his chartering philosophy and said that whoever I'm speaking to, it's like trying to find out what is your favorite football team. Everyone seemed to have their own favorite, and everyone were extremely passionate about their own favorite, and everyone realizes that maybe their own favorite is not the only solution. So probably is this with the uncertainty on the fuel selection, is this one of the key hurdles to kind of move into the future for all of you? What are your thoughts about that? Feel free, John. Yeah.
I mean, look, we are on an energy transition, and the transition can take any multiple paths. A lot of big players have taken decision to put some of their fleet in methanol. Others in, of course, LNG carriers are into LNG engines, MAGI engines. The LPG fleet is going for dual fuel LPG engines, LGIP engines. And now I don't know what's going to happen with the ammonia engine. I'm, holding back on that. I'm not certain what's going to happen. And then we have ethane engines, biofuel engines. So these are all transition energy fuels. Even ammonia. I don't see ammonia as being I think hydrogen is probably the best solution for us in the future. It's not here yet, but it will happen at some point in the future after we manage to have, or maybe electricity. I think electricity, as Richard said, when those fuel cells become large enough and big enough to give us enough megawatts, we might be able to move ships. And finally, and not least, is nuclear energy. Yeah. There are smaller, more efficient nuclear reactors that are being discussed for the shipping industry, and which will last the life of the ship and more. So we see a lot of opportunities in the future. Right now, we'll try to do the best with what we can, perhaps transition to a better fuel for what we do, and then eventually we'll see what we do in 2030.
What about you, Andrea? I mean, you are really trading, like you said, a lot of commodities. You depend on a large fleet being available globally. Are you afraid of kind of missing out on opportunities coming there from technology, or are you trying to kind of ride many horses at the same time?
Look, my view is we are traders, and one of the main tasks of a trader is to make the markets more efficient. Part of making the markets more efficient is to choose the right fuels of the future. I think we're quite privileged here at Trafigura because we're not structurally long a certain fuel. Let's say we're not structurally long LNG, and we therefore may have an internal unconscious bias, let's say, to favor LNG versus methanol or ammonia. We can look at all the different fuels quite objectively. We are looking constantly. At the moment, we believe that the champions of the future will be hydrogen-based fuels, and in particular ammonia. But we're obviously evaluating all opportunities all the times. Obviously, it's becoming very interesting for us because you are suddenly starting to see very, very different vessels: dual fuel methanol, dual fuel LPG, dual fuel LNG, and all these vessels have different, obviously, economics. And we have to. Our job is to ensure that we can monitor on a daily basis all the fluctuations in the different economics and look for the best.
And Paulo, on the strategy here, what are you monitoring closely to ensure that you are not missing out on opportunities here on technology or staying in the race?
So we do that in a couple of main ways. We don't have a particularly big team internally. There's 35 of us or so. Clearly we have a technical team that monitors what's happening in the markets, etc. And we do so from the investment side. But so two ways. One is through organizations such as Getting to Zero and the Maersk Mc-Kinney Moller Center, both of which we're part of, where there's a good amount of information sharing, and where we can meet other players in the market, not necessarily peers of ours in the investment space, but charterers, technology providers. And then the other thing that we do that we've increasingly focused on is to try to have a good number of strategic dialogues with key charterers in each of the main segments of containers, bulkers, and tankers. Similarly to what Andrea said about Trafigura not being structurally long any particular commodity, we are being a financial investor in shipping. Clearly, we're long ships, but we have a very diversified portfolio. We don't do the technical management ourselves. We don't do the commercial management other than on a very limited basis. So what we focus on is having good dialogues with charterers so that we can match the right type of vessel and the right type of fuel with the needs of those sort of charterers.
Does this resonate good with you, Richard? I think long-term strategic discussion with the charterers and up the value chain, that must be kind of spot on also for the type of position that Purus is working on.
Yeah, without a doubt it is, with a variety, you know, whether it's governments or commercial charterers, exactly that, or whether it's, you know, BP, if we're transporting gas, etc. You know, I think with all these conversations that we need to remind ourselves that 95% of the Internet of Real Things is being achieved with 2.5% of global carbon. You know, as an industry, we're doing really well. And what really interests me recently was this, I don't know if you've been seeing it, but this talk about scope 4 emissions and saying, well, exactly how much carbon are you saving by the businesses that you're in. And when you look at shipping and the very low amount of emission per goods, to say, that's transported around, of course, we've got things that we will do in the future when, as John says, when things become a little bit more technology obvious. And I would say that the more we find out, the less obvious things are. You talk about hydrogen, and then I heard recently that the problem with hydrogen is it burns at such a high temperature that all of the existing rules that we have for structural fire protection would be out of the window if we have a hydrogen fire because of the intensity of the heat. So, you know, we're talking first about engines, and then we're all of a sudden talking about naval architecture, structural fire protection. So there's a huge amount to go in the journey, but undoubtedly, carbon. I think carbon tax as well. If we had carbon tax that we all understood, then that would make it much clearer for the charterer to make a decision and make sure that we're all operating on an equal footing. But you know, if we don't have charterers, we don't have a business. So undoubtedly, that's a big part of our strategy going forward.
Yeah, John, on this one, I mean, you're transporting a lot of I would call wet product and probably also dry product, but pressurized. A lot of this, the product that you're transporting today would probably be more in demand in the future if this with alternative fuels is kind of picking up in different directions. Do you see that the market will kind of remain strong for you moving forward, and that it will be strengthened by the present decarbonization development? Or do you see that it's possible threats in that?
I don't know. You know, I don't want to say the things by kind of going back to basics, but eventually, I mean, whatever we produce out of the earth, any of the fossil fuels produces gas liquids, either crude oil gas liquids or natural gas liquids. And mainly those gas liquids are, their composition varies depending on where it is in which part of the world, but about 45–50% is LPG. And LPG is used in the petrochemical industry quite extensively, and more recently, in the last 10 years, significantly more than naphtha, which is the competitor to LPG. Naphtha was the mainstream of the petrochemical industry. With the abundance of shale exploration, the abundance of natural gas liquids or crude oil gas liquids, we have ended up with LPG that now goes to all the petrochemical plants. It goes to purpose-made crackers and facilities that produce a number of products. So it has become more and more the mainstay of the chemical industry. Why I'm saying all this is that while natural gas is used for heating and cooking our homes, LPG is used for the whole petrochemical industry for a number and myriad of products. So in a way, I'm saying that I do not see LPG going away. Besides the fact that it burns very cleanly, it is transportable easily from, you know, a little butane bottle to a gas lighter to anything, and it is very conveniently and easily used. It also has these huge array of products that come out of the petrochemical industry. And so I see it as becoming stronger and stronger as we use less of the LPG for fuel and we use it more for the petrochemical industry. So it's going to become more and more important to use that in so many parts of industry. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, so very much like more of the products will be needed, or of the product that you're transporting will be needed in the production plant and the industrial part of the industry rather than being burned as a fuel. I think that's a short summary of the last part here.
Yeah.
Andrea, I mean, as a big, you said trader here, Richard, he mentioned this with scope 4. What about accountability on this? Are you seeing that you are changing your position or asking more accountability and traceability from the value chain which you are purchasing for? Or you see that there is a big change there? Or is that an important part of the transition?
I mean, what we're noticing is that our suppliers and our receivers want us to help them reduce their emissions, whether they are scope 1 or scope 3. I must confess, and I apologize, I haven't heard about scope 4, but I will go and research as much as possible at the end of this panel. But I also want to touch on something that was mentioned before, and it's the tax on CO2. I think this is absolutely vital because we need to align the incentives to decarbonize with the, let's call it, profitability or profit incentives. And if we achieve that, it would be so much easier to decarbonize the industry. And I'm very glad that you have touched on this point before. And another important thing, I think, is we need to create a legal framework that makes people comfortable to invest in technologies and that incentivizes people to be first movers. And again, when we see the EU ETS delaying the entrance of shipping from 2023 to now potentially 2024, I don't think these things help when it comes to decarbonizing the shipping world, unfortunately.
Paulo, I saw you nodding there, so you probably agree to the last.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the key things: clarity on regulations in general, some sort of carbon pricing, whether it be a bunker surcharge, ETS, anything like that. We need the industry needs the economic incentives in place. And we've only really seen a strong commitment to zero carbon fuels in other than on a very small. On a very small scale. The only large scale that we've seen so far really is with Maersk and backing green methanol. And that's primarily because, you know, Maersk is close to the retailers who are close to consumers who are increasingly willing to pay what in effect on a consumer good is a very small premium in order to reduce the carbon footprint. So that works at sort of the top end of the market in container shipping, but the mechanisms are not in place for that currently to incentivize investment in the bulk spaces, be it wet bulk or dry bulk, where the cargo is further away from the customer and where the cargo, just as a matter of fact, it doesn't make it good or bad, but the cargo has a lower value per weight, and therefore the transport costs are much more important than for a consumer good such as a laptop or a pair of Nike sneakers, where the cost of zero fuel would be an insignificant increase in terms of the landed ultimate cost of a pair of sneakers. So we need those incentives in place so we have a level playing field for all of shipping.
I really like what you said. We need those incentives. And then I want to ask you, Richard, because with your background, you mentioned earlier with the importance of regulations and safety and so on. What we have seen recently with the Poseidon Principles, with the Sea Cargo Charterer, and now lately also with the Poseidon Principles for marine insurance, do you think that these kind of new practices and I should call best practices, are they really incentivizing, or are they kind of helping to kickstart or increase the speed of the transformation which is taking place?
Yeah, I mean, I've been vocal in support of Poseidon Principles. I've been vocal against Poseidon Principles. I can, but in principle, I mean, if you say in principle, no pun intended. I think if everyone shows their commitment to zero carbon or net zero carbon, then the IMO is great inertia to the industry, as well as being a promoter of change. So, I think in this case, I think the commercial side is going to is actually going to push us faster forward than the IMO. But personally, Poseidon Principles, I really admire the fact that they were quick to the market with that, and I can understand it for banking in terms of investing in ships that they need to know are going to give a return for as long as the loan. I can sort of understand it for hull and machinery insurance. I think it's more difficult to justify with P&I insurance, to be quite honest, where they're mutuals. And I'm not quite sure what would happen with the portfolio, the carbon portfolio measurement system for those. To me, there's a dislocation in the idea for the marine insurance, and I think the one thing that the ship owner is struggling with is duplication and bureaucracy. And what I don't want to find with extending these things is that the ship owner is, employing 2, 3, 4, 5 people, depending on the size of the ship, merely to report the same carbon portfolio measurements requirements for no real benefit. So that would be my point. Yeah, yes, great, everyone does it. Great, everyone takes a note of it. I think I'm more in favour of taxation at a global level than I am at the other levels. But the charter is taking note of it and encouraging people to be, as Andrea says, first movers. That's really important. But it has to be a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah, John, do you subscribe to that? It has to be a level playing field. I mean, we are talking about really the difference between the global regulation versus commercial pressure, which always will be there and always will change, and which lately have changed towards more power towards the consumers and maybe organizations and stakeholders who did not used to have that power in the past.
True, it has. And there has been an alignment of the various sectors, as I started saying early on this discussion on decarbonization. The idea of the polluter pays is a strong one. I think a lot of people will subscribe to that and will agree to that. This is a brand new concept that I think in the face of decarbonization is very strong argument that the polluter should pay, whether it is the charter or whether it is the port or whether it's the industry or whether it's the ship. They have to pay. However, also the regulatory people have to realize that it's not CO2 only. We are talking about a global warming potential, and methane is 30 times worse than carbon dioxide. And, we haven't done anything yet on that. And then nitrous oxide has a global warming potential 300 times worse than carbon dioxide. So we should also mandate about things like that. I mean, okay, we are talking about CO2. We will get the CO2, I'm sure, quite efficiently as we are getting there, I think, by making our ships performing better, by using better fuels and by treating our emissions, whether it is, with carbon capture or something like that. However, we should make sure that methane, nitrous oxides, and other matters are also reduced to zero. And I don't hear any discussion about that.
Paulo, any comments?
I guess I agree with John on probably not enough being done on nitrous oxides. I think that there is more of a recognition on methane, however, not necessarily from slip from engines, but at least in terms of leakage in the systems more from production and midstream. But I think that is absolutely right, and I guess that it's not the key hurdle for ammonia becoming a fuel, at least in a internal combustion engine, as opposed to in a fuel cell, where I don't think in a fuel cell nitrous oxides are produced. But this will be a key hurdle to ammonia before it becomes a mainstream fuel via fuel cells, a carrier of hydrogen, for it being an important fuel in the meantime, being used in ammonia-capable traditional diesel engines.
Agreed.
Yeah, Andrea, also are you following a particular strategy when you are selecting your long-time charter? You mentioned this with placing a bet and really trying to have long-term charter where you are aiming for something which is different and something positive. Is there a particular strategy you follow? What do you take first versus what is the longer-term decisions?
I would say at the moment we are really focusing on the most modern vessels and vessels which are technically managed by owners with whom we can collaborate around decarbonization. This is very, very important. We are noticing that we're doing more and more with a selected pool of ship owners that are also investing resources towards the maritime decarbonization. This is, I think, the most important feature of how we select our thesis.
Paulo, going back to you, do you see a change in expectations from charter here that they are really keen to have these long-term discussions about alternative fuels and about their own accountability, to put it that way? I mean, showing what you are causing of emissions.
I think that the leaders in the different key segments of shipping are there increasingly to charter in longer term. If there is an economic incentive for them to do so. I mean, of course, it did start with container shipping again because it's closer to the consumer. But we see definitely as a trend, and it's probably started over the past couple of years, that the charter world recognizes that ships with lower carbon footprints probably are more suited to longer term charters, and we as an investment manager are looking to match those long-term charters with counterparties that are seeking lower carbon footprints and eventually close to zero carbon footprints with the capital that we have, which is institutional capital of primarily pension funds, who are some of the first movers in terms of backing other industries to decarbonize. They've been some of the biggest investors in renewable energy. They've started investing in other parts of the fuel and electrification and charging infrastructure. And they also increasingly see that shipping is moving towards this, at least again, at the top end of shipping, is moving towards longer term charters that are necessary to make the investments in these sort of vessels viable. And that very much suits pension funds who are looking for longer term visible cash flows, that want to be invested in assets that perform well in times of high inflation, which ships tend to do, that perform even better in an environment of high fuel prices and or carbon taxes, because that's something that pension funds are very concerned about, because the pensioners, one of their pension beneficiaries' key cost items, if you're a retired person, is your electricity and your heating bills, et cetera. So they want investments that actually pay off well in environments where they need to be paying out more to their pensioners to pay for their bills. And you take that together with the fact that shipping is an industry that it is hard to abate. There aren't many people who think that you can electrify much of shipping other than short sea. It makes it even more important it makes it even more attractive for pension funds to help and to help initiate decarbonization of an industry that historically, although we talked about the fact that it moves 90% of world trade with 2.5 or 3% of CO2, we do have to recognize that the industry doesn't have a great reputation with a lot of the world. And shipping needs to move forward in decarbonization.
Yeah, it's very interesting reflection. I mean, putting it in the bigger context here, and I also like what John said earlier about the fact that the challenge is actually probably not to decarbonize, but to tackle the global warming, and that there are many substances here that are playing a role in this. Richard, any comments or reflection from your side on this?
I was just listening to both Andrea and Paulo, and sort of recognizing, thinking about John as well, sitting in Piraeus, 750 ship owners or something sitting in Greece. And it would be a shame, perhaps, if we end up with the smaller ship owners who can't invest in the same way on technologies, and we end up the fact that this is just going to be a much bigger number of corporates, and yet a lot smaller number of ship owners as a consequence of decarbonization or global warming, whichever way you want to put it. So maybe which something I'd never thought of before is this going to force a fundamental shift in the owning structure of shipping, which perhaps will be an unforeseen result of decarbonization.
Yeah, good reflections there. I can notice that we are actually close to the part where we need to sum up because we have a timeline here before Nicholas is coming back on. So I think what I will do now is to challenge each one of you to come with try to stay within a 30-second summary on what is your key takeaways on the subject of decarbonization and the subject of transforming our industry. What is the key takeaway that you want people to focus on, or that is on the top of your brain now? And if I may start with John on this one, and then Paulo as the next one.
All right, thank you. We should be all aligned towards decarbonization. There's no doubt about that. We should all try to do small steps. Richard, we will do it in small steps with small low-bearing fruit in the beginning, and then as in technology advances, we will be able to do more things. So the small ship owner will be able to cope with that, because if they start doing logistics, digitalization, hydrodynamics, and machinery, which are low-bearing fruit and can happen easily and cheaply, then we can go on to carbon capture, which is a type of a scrubber. We did scrubbers a few years back, just like that. Many people did it. Many ships did it. I think it will become a technology that is available to many people and to many ships. And maybe the dual fuels, etc. Yes, you can build new ships with new technologies and new fuels, but I'd like to see more electrification in ships, more fuel cells in ships. I'd like to see, a lot of things that need to be seen and help with the future of shipping. So that's where I leave it.
Yeah, Paulo, and then next, Richard.
I don't disagree with anything John said. I do think it's going to be possible for small ship owners to participate, but we need to invest in the next 10 to 15 years, something like $1 trillion to change the vast majority of the fleet. And as I was mentioning earlier, I think that this moves us towards larger, more financially oriented investment houses or ship owners, probably more private than public than in the past, but also larger, and that matching up the right type of capital for the right risk structures is very important, and that's where we as Tufton are going to play a very key part.
Thanks. Then Richard, and before Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, okay, just to be really quick, I think this is one problem, multiple solutions. As John says, we'll all be on a different trajectory in terms of speed of implementation. And I think, like SDG 17 asked us to do, we've got to be really open with the whole industry on our experiences of trying the new solutions, and therefore the whole industry will benefit from first movers, middle movers, etc. As we walk into the unknown in the next 10 to 15 years.
And Andrea?
I would finish saying that decarbonization is an ultra marathon and not a sprint, but it's very important that we don't stop. And at the moment, you have an energy crisis going on, which it's very important that it does not stop the path towards decarbonization. I think that is one of the most important things. And then in addition to this, we need regulatory bodies, in particular the IMO, to give us the tools that we need in order to progress when it comes to decarbonizing the shipping world.
Thank you very much. And to summarize then on my behalf, I like what you said, Andrea, that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And it's important to keep moving. And it's important to keep moving maybe with small incremental steps in new directions first. I also heard the word alignment. There are so many stakeholders that can and should align for this to happen, because this is like a big orchestra changing the music pretty fast, and that cannot really be done in a good sense unless it's being orchestrated. So it's requiring more dialogue between stakeholders, maybe more transparency. I think this key strategy that I'm focusing for the moment is on, in order to decarbonize, which I hope that we all agree is important, using digital tools, using available software, but also creating a new level of trust and accountability between the stakeholders. That is among the key items where we need to have focus. So thank you very much, dear panelists, all of you, for joining in this session, and then back to the organizer.
Thank you, Arnstein.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.